Welcome to the viewers and learners of the Certificate in Consumer Protection offered by the School of Law, Indira Gandhi National Open University. Today we are going to discuss another important subject called the Consumer International. This is covered under our course code CPA 101 and the block number 2 and the unit number 6. As you know, at the international level, the growth of consumer movement assumes very great importance. The consumer movement across the globe through various consumer groups and organizations was growing very strongly in the first of the 20th century. Then later on, after some of the like-minded countries like UK, USA, Netherlands, Australia, France, Ireland, Austria, Israel, Sweden, New Zealand, Denmark and Norway, they thought it necessary to have a formal platform for the purpose of protecting the interests of the consumer. So accordingly, they met on 1st April in the year 1960 at The Hague, and that formed the basis for the formation of the new social institution called the first formation of the International Organization of Consumer Unions. But somehow the word union was, this is the symbol of the Consumer International, it's a globally recognized symbol. So please make a note of it. No, coming back to this subject, International Consumer Cooperative Union, the word union was not very comfortable with all the nations, because the union refers to the small part of any smaller organization union. Maybe it refers to the micropic say institution concerned, trade union sort of a thing. So then they thought that once the institutions are working at the global level, at the international level, then the name itself reflects that it's a global institution. Accordingly, the name of the International Organization of Consumer Union was changed to Consumers International in the year 1995. Therefore, now the international body name is called the Consumer International, and the symbol I showed in the previous slide. Now, today, as on date, the Consumer International acts as the World Federation of Consumer Groups that serves as an independent and authoritative global voice of the consumers. The primary job and task of this Consumer International is to fight for the causes of the consumers globally across the country. And primarily, as we discussed in some other lectures, there's a United Nations guidelines on consumer protection, and this Consumer International has taken the responsibility to ensure or to monitor or to tell the world, these bodies or the countries that they have a duty to follow this guidelines which are related to the consumer protection. That was the primary job or task of the Consumer International concern. Now, the Consumer International currently has offices in various countries like Africa, Asia, Europe and Latin America, and also it has a project coordinators or project within countries like Argentina and the Caribbean. And as on date, the Consumer International is having over 200 member organizations across the country, spread over in 150 countries around the world. And this Consumer International continues to build a powerful international movement to empower and protect the interests of the consumers and their interest. Now, let us move to the status. What is the status of the Consumer International? The status of consumer is analogous to, or the consumer, it has a formal status with that of the global governing bodies such as World Health Organization, World Intellectual Property Organization and the UN Commissions on Sustainable Development. So it is having a status at par with World Health Organization and WIPO and the UN Commission on Sustainable Development. It raises the most important consumer issues of the day at the International Policy Making Forum. So, as I said, the primary concern of this body is to raise issues affecting the consumers across the globe, and various, particularly in the form of the infringement of the rights of the consumers provided in the UN guidelines on consumer, and also the next, based on the United Nations guidelines on consumer protection, almost all the nations, they formed their own consumer laws, and such consumer laws also provided the safeguards and protection for the interest of the consumers. So if any country for one reason or other, if they fail to say follow the UN guidelines, or if there is infringement of the rights under the municipal or domestic law, then this consumer interest will come forward and take up the matter with the countries concerned. Look here, you have a responsibility under the UN Charter, under the UN guidelines, to protect the interest of the consumer. Therefore, you have to act accordingly. Now, what is the relation with the consumer organization in different countries versus the consumer international? Actually, consumer international at the global level, it's a symbolic body, but whereas it is not independent by itself. It has a membership, as I said, 220 members, and who are the members? They are the consumer organizations situated in 115 countries. So these are like in India, we have the National Consumer Cooperative Federation. That it is a member of this Consumer International. Likewise, there are several recognized consumer organizations working in almost 150 countries concerned. So then we have to see what is the relation with the consumer organization function in each country, and vis-a-vis that of the object and function of the consumer international concern. Consumer organizations around the world, big or small, use the materials produced with the consumer international to generate local initiatives and media coverage for their work. What they do, the consumer organizations, by following the push of the consumer international, they generate local initiatives to create local awareness among the people through media coverage and other works and all. Initiated by this consumer organization include organizing special campaigns, organizing press conferences, then displaying public exhibitions and workshops, and also having street plays or street events, etc., related to the protection of the interests of the consumer. That is very, very important. All their activities are closely related or connected to the protection of the interests of the consumers only. So the consumer groups share the same aim and objective of bringing important and recorded needed benefits for the consumers in line with the aims of the Consumer International. Now, Consumer International seeks to hold corporations accountable and acts as a global watchdog against any behavior that threatens or ignores or abuse the UN guidelines and the principles on consumer protection, about which I referred about you. See, one thing we should understand, as I said, in our India Consumer Protection Act provided for a settlement of the consumer grievances. So any person who is affected or whose consumer right is violated or infringed, they have the legal recourse. To go before the consumer forum, consumer at the district level, state level, and national commission. But this is what the individual can take up the matter himself for his own rights. But when we talk about the consumer international, there are certain issues not individual oriented, but the group oriented, country oriented, specific related to the particular country. So this job of the consumer international will not take individual issues. It will take issues affecting either the country as a whole, or region as a whole, or the world as a whole. So that is what the main difference that we should understand. So it seeks to hold corporations, and the global these days, all the corporations have become global. So they have the presence across the world. So therefore, individually, it may not be possible for a person sitting in Delhi or Madras or any other parts of India to fight with the global organizations like mighty organizations and all, or even person sitting in any other countries and all. But for such type of fighting such type of world level organization, mighty organization, then the consumer international appropriate institution which is in a position to take up the matters related to the consumers, interests of the consumers, and fight before even the country legal forums. Therefore, that is what that one should understand. It is working for the common cause of the consumers across the globe, and it's not taking any individual matters. Now, objectives of global. What is the objectives of the global consumer movement? That one should also understand. First of all, they have the certain objectives and principles. What are those? Let us see. First of all, protection against the malpractices adopted by the traders, or it may be a producer, it may be a seller, it may be a manufacturer. And also, malpractices is one of the serious problem faced by the consumers, say practiced by these traders and producers, manufacturers and all. So, the main objective of the consumer, therefore, is to protect the interests of the consumers from these malpractices adopted by the business community, such as what type of malpractices one should understand. We have discussed already, but even I can tell you the malpractices or the method or manner of adopting malpractice may include charging a high price than the price fixed by the government, or price mentioned the label on the commodity, or supplying inferior goods or substandard goods. That also became a part of the malpractices by using, say, colorable items and all. Then creating artificial shortage in the market. That's a very serious issue. Very often the traders, with the view to create glut in the market, that they despite having sufficient quantity of the commodity at their disposal, they don't release it to the market. With the result, there's a panic is created, and due to this panic, the people, they rush to purchase the commodity at an exorbitant prices. So it is also kind of a malpractice only. So this objective, one of the objectives of the consumer is to fight against the malpractices adopted by the business community at large across the globe. The next important objective of the consumer movement is promotion of the consumer education. Consumer movements aims in education is very important. The consumer should be made aware. In a country like India, where more than 60 to 70% people are illiterate, they are residing in rural areas and semi areas. So they are not even, when they are not in a position to read and write, but they become the big rural market. They become the part of the rural market. So how to enable such type of people, illiterate people, rural people and village people, to ensure their consumer rights and all. So for that purpose, consumer education is the only way. It may be even by radio, through television, mechanisms that one has to adopt, or even whatever we discussed about the street plays sort of a thing. We have to organize in different places, make the people understand, aware of their rights. So therefore, by that way, they have to be equipped with that knowledge, so that they can fight, argue, they can fight with the sellers or the producers concerned about in protection of their rights. Now, then, representing the consumers, that is also the consumer job is to represent the consumers, as I said, in the at the government policy making body or in the legal matters also. So the consumer protection organizations such as Consumer Guidance Society of India represents on behalf of the consumers out to the government authorities, so as to frame proper consumer protection laws and other measures to for the consumer protection. No, see, there are certain consumer protection consumer organization working in India, like based in say Ahmedabad, Gujarat, and in other parts of the country, and they they come out with a framework for even they suggest to the government what type of legal changes the law required, what type of guidelines are required, what type of these rules have to be framed. So they help, assist and support the government in framing the law, rules and regulations only. This one, because common man, it's not possible for a common man to provide any guidelines to the government for bring the change in the law, whereas as an institution, they are in a better position to. The next principle is the publishing unfair practices. The Consumer Protection Organization publishes in various media regarding the unethical practices adopted by the business community. And see again, in addition to malpractices adopted, the unethical practices are being very large scale adopted by the traders and consumers. So one of the jobs of the Consumer International to take steps against this unethical practices adopted by the traders. Now then, the job of this Consumer International is also to help forming of associations. Consumer movement encourages the consumers to form consumer protection associations at all levels. See, at the global level remaining, they will be taking the larger issues, but there are issues concerning the local people in a large scale manner. So for that, The consumer international, the global, may not come into the needs of the people in a small locality or a village or town. So therefore, what they do is they promote, encourage the local people to form their own say associations or organizations for fighting their protection of their own consumer interests and rights. Right. Then support the business community. See, their job is also to support the business community. But in what manner? Consumer movement aims at extending cooperation and support to the business community in dealing with their problems and difficulties. Sometimes this suppliers also, they face a lot of difficulty and they may not be in a position to solve it also. They also say to take the help of the consumer international with a request to take up their difficulties and problems and place it before the concerned government authorities for bringing necessary changes in the law or policy and all those also. So the consumer international or consumer organizations are also helping the business community in addition to say protecting the interests of the consumer. Then assistance in legal matters. We have already discussed about this grievance machinery, legal grievance redressal mechanism provided under consumer protection law. Now, when the consumers, as I said, they are illiterate, they can't, they are living in the rural areas. They do not know where to file, how to file, what should be mentioned in the petitions and all. So therefore, legal issue is a technical matter. So it's highly technical. Ordinary man cannot do that. So therefore, these consumer organizations, they come to the rescue of the affected consumers in by way of helping that drafting their own complaint, then even the drafting this their own representation to the consumer to the supplier and distributors, and if the relief is not obtained, then they will also draft a petition for filing before the court of law in the form of petition, and also they will write a written statement on all those things. And also legal support is provided by these consumer organizations to the locally affected individual consumer. Then exerting or creating pressure on the business community. Again, you know, we all know this business community is always very strong and powerful. So therefore, wherever there is a need, then this consumer organization, they put and exert pressure on this business community also, and by forcing them to do not to do things which are affecting the interest of the consumer. Then very briefly, the consumer organization primary job is also to ensure enjoyment of the protection of the consumer rights. We have discussed elaborately in another lecture. I'm sure you will watch it later. You must have watched it also. Now let me very briefly tell you what are the consumer rights. 8 consumer rights are there. The consumer rights are right to basic needs such as food, housing, etc. Then right to safety, that safety about the products and its ingredients, right to be informed about the quality, quantity, purity standards of the commodities concerned. Then right to choose from among the various available commodities are concerned. We talked about the artificial creation of the shortage. Even now, the producer, they were tacit and the shopkeepers telling that no, you please promote my product, I will give you share, don't show your product of other brands or to the consumers and all this going. So the customer should have the right to select among the various commodities. Then enjoyment of the right to enjoyment of healthy and sustainable environment, very very important these days, COVID period. So we have to be very conscious that we have to maintain a good environment, and not only among ourselves but surrounding areas also, so that we can help not only ourselves but others also. The right to have a redressal, I referred about this state commission, national commission and the district commission and all for a redressal of the consumer grievances, and the consumer education I referred about, and the most important consumer to be they have the right to be heard at the appropriate forums like policy making bodies or in other places also. These are the rights of the consumers. Now, Consumer Action Charter 1978, just what are the main features of it? I will not go through the entire thing. The main features of the Consumer Action Charter are critical awareness. The citizen must be made aware of the need to frequently question about the quality of goods and services. That's one of they have to creating critical awareness among the consumers about their own rights. Then involvement in action. That citizen must assert themselves and act to ensure that they get a fair deal from traders and the sellers. Then they also have the social responsibility, very very important. Social responsibility, citizens must act with the social responsibility, with the concern and sensitivity to the impact of their actions on other citizens, in particular in relation to disadvantaged groups in the community and in relation to the economic and socially disadvantaged sections of the society. Then also ecological responsibility. They should also, ecology is very very important along with the environment is concerned. There must be a heightened sensitivity to the impact of consumer decisions on the physical, environmental, which must be developed in a harmonious way, promoting conservation. And the consumer must fight against the degradation of the most crucial factor in improving the real quality of the life for the present and the future is concerned. Now, solidarity is another important tool available with the consumer organization. The best and the most effective action towards solidarity is through cooperative efforts with the formation of the citizen groups who together can have the strength and influence to ensure that adequate attention is given to the consumer interest and groups is concerned. Now, there is a shift from value for money to the value of the people. Earlier, the people are more concerned with the value of the money, the price of the commodity. They are more concerned, cautious. If the price is very high, they will not go for it. But now, that is not the case. Value of the money is not that important to the extent of value of the people. Value of the people is very important. Value of the people, safety of the people, security of the people, quality life of the people. These things are very ultimately great and important. Even at the case of we have to pay more prices also. That's all. The consumer movement, its early stages of the development in the 1960s was concerned with value of money concept, but now broadened its missions to the value of the people. Global issues such as lack of basic needs and amenities, ecology, the behavior of multinational corporations, safeguards against biotechnology, irrational prescription of medicines, quality of life, eco-labeling of products, and the green consumerism are finding place on the agenda of the several consumer organizations, not only nationally but also globally. Producers and their products are no longer judged merely on quality, durability, performance, price, and safety of the service of commodity. Consumers are now asked to evaluate products and producers based on the three additional criteria of ease, that is the ethics, ecology, and equity. Now people are looking for this type of the values also, whether these things are practiced or followed by the traders also. Based on that, they evaluate the product also. Now, the Indian scenario vis-a-vis the consumer international. The origin and the growth of consumer movement in India has many similarities to that of the movements of the consumer international. In India, the consumer movement as a social force originated with the necessity of protecting and promoting the interest of the consumers against unethical and unfair trade practices. The consumer movement was born in an organized form in the 1960s. In the early 70s, consumer organizations groups were formed to look into the malpractices in ration shops and overcrowding in the road transport sector. More recently, India witnessed an upsurge in the number of consumer groups. Now, shortages in the supply of essential commodities and unsatisfactory functioning of the public distribution system led activists to form consumer organizations in their towns and localities to ventilate their grievances to the authorities concerned, that is, issues related to the adulteration of food distributed through PDS, public distribution system and all. The enactment of Consumer Protection Act 1986, followed by the Consumer Protection Act 2019, paved way in the number of new organizations in the country. Now let us come to the empowerment of consumer. See, empowerment of consumer is equally important. The major programs included consumer education, product testing, product safety, promotion of eco-labeled products, and environmental conservation as compared to the mindedness of the consumption of goods. A code of conduct for the international corporations, investor protection, access to the poor, access of the poor to the basic needs and services were some of the major issues that confront the consumer organization in India in this expansionist phases. Now let us come to something one should also know the consumer manifesto. What is that and what is the aim or what is the theme of the consumer manifesto? The conditions of consumers' life must become better and more equitable. That is what the theme of the consumer manifesto is. At the same time, we realize that economic growth is possible only when it leads to the general well-being and happiness of the consumers at large scale. Now, the future trends, I will not read it out everything and all. There are the future trends, that the full implementation of United Nations guideline for consumer protection globally is one of the important thing to be pursued in the past, in the future. The establishment of the monitoring and assistance system for the implementation with the United Nations also another requirement. Then adoption by the United Nations on the full implementation of the code of conduct on transnational corporations by government. This is going to the future agenda for this consumer international. Then promoting the fulfillment of the basics needs of all consumers, in particular of the poor, low income and disadvantaged and underprivileged segment that I referred already. Then establishment of the national and international laws that prohibit trade in hazardous products and eliminate double standards in international trade. Then establishment of stringent international guidelines on the setting and operations of potentially hazardous industrial and agricultural plants, processes and practices, including the right to full information by the local community and the workers. Then elimination of economic practices which inhibit the equal distribution of food and encouragement of national and international food policies aimed at meeting people's need for safe and nutritious food. Then implementation of the policies on new information technology which ensure on the one hand the fair protection of the consumers and on the other that they make full use of the technology for their own benefit. Then the development of testing and research with particular reference to the needs of the third world countries, building on the experiences, skills and resources of the international government, consumer international testing organizations. Last only 2 points are there. The reduction and ultimately dismantling of trade barriers which have a negative impact on consumers and the establishment of national bodies with the consumer representation to analyze and publish relevant information concerning the cost and benefits of the proposed and existing trade controls are concerned. Now the last point is perhaps ensuring responsiveness of monopolies, providing services to consumers, including ways to measure their performance in relation to meeting the needs of consumers and to ensure accountability. With this, we conclude our discussion on the topics concerned. Now, I'll meet you on some other topic. Thank you.